And hello, everybody, to a lot of people to the south of Germany, to people from Switzerland, to people from the area I'm from, nearby even. I saw a few people coming from North Rhine-Westphalia. That's wonderful. To all of you, thank you very much for joining us today at lunchtime, as Özlem said. I'm very pleased that so many people are interested in agile learning and in co-learning with B2 C1 students. My name is Britta. Those of you who don't know me yet, I'm based in Bielefeld, the non-existent town near the Teutoburger Forest. Yeah, I know the joke. This is where I run a language and communication skills institute. When I don't do that, I do a little bit of work for Cornelsen. I've been involved in a couple of projects there, including the Basis for Business series and a couple of short course series books. So this is what I do in my free time, so to say. And this is why I guess Cornelsen invited me today. To talk and to learn with you together about agile learning and the kind of changes that are going on right now in the agile learning and business English teaching community. But before we get started, can everybody hear me okay? Can you see me okay? Am I loud enough? Just a few yeses or nos in the chat with yes, yes, yes. Cool, very good, all fine, all good, super. So ready to get started. So let me show you what I thought we could discuss today, and I'll appreciate all your input in the chat and in the surveys that I'm going to put on the screen. So the more you communicate, the more you share with us, the better. I'm sure we can all benefit from all your expertise, all the years of teaching we have here together right now. So let's have a look at the agenda. This is what I thought we could do today. We'll first have a look at the situation, then and now, then at agile learning, then at the I can handle it all students and how we can improve their learning experience and our co-learning experience by needs analysis. And finally, I would like to have a look at a few teaching solutions based on the fabulous book by Anne Hodgson, Carol Eilertson, the new C1 book that hit the shelves a couple of weeks ago, part of the Business English series C1 book, which I can really, really, really recommend. Not only because I'm doing this for Cornelsen today, but because it is a fabulous book. So let's get started and have a look at the first slide, which says the situation then and now. Can I pick your brain on this? If you look back 4 to 5 years maybe, and I suppose most of you have been teaching that long, what in your experience has changed so far? I'm going to put a survey there in the middle of the screen. Just type a few ideas that come to your mind into the box there, and we're going to have a look at what your experiences have been so far in the changing business English world. Just type away in the box that you see there. Lack of security. It has become very much more specified. The age of the participants, that's a very interesting thing to say. Digital world has a huge impact. Clients moving to online portals. Real-to-life approach to English in order to reflect the real world. Super interesting point. Students are less interested in learning business jargon. That's a very interesting aspect as well. Emails over traditional letters, definitely, my experience too. The only people I know who still write letters are lawyers and auditors, financial auditors. I don't have anybody else who wants to learn how to write emails, at least at that level anymore, at the B2, C1 level. Okay, anything else you'd like to add? I can see a few people still typing. Okay. Yes, there are a lot of things that absolutely mirror my experience, so I'm very happy I'm not the only one. confusion with American, British, and international English. Oh yes, international or global English. Yeah, a big topic too. What kind of English are we supposed to teach nowadays? Very, very interesting. And is it relevant what kind of English we teach? Do we still have to define that we teach either American or British or Australian English? Very interesting. I'm gonna, if that's okay with you, I'm gonna move this out of our main field now. So if there is anything else that comes to mind, just write it into the chat box so it won't get lost. So move it out again. And I would like to share with you what I've experienced so far and what the kind of changes are that at the institute I work for and the clients I work with had to react to. So what has changed? What comes to mind to me personally, something like employability skills. If some of you guys took part in the Cornelsen Sprachentag on the 17th of October, you might have heard Mike Hogan talking about employability skills. Definitely something that is very much being discussed right now. What do younger students of ours in company training, what kind of skills do they need to survive in the future work environment? This is something that is very much reflected in the future job reports by the World Economic Forum. And one of the top skills there are managing people, being able to think creatively, and solving problems. So something that will definitely have to go into our teaching, I think, and into the books that, or the material that we're going to use in the future. So employability skills, a big thing. Then a second aspect that came to my mind was app-based language learning. Lots of you wrote into the survey, digitization is a big thing. So I still have people saying, oh, well, I nowadays learn with, this app that is so often advertised on TV, whose name I will not mention now. Say, okay, are you successful doing that? Or would you rather have a language class, and how long do you stay on the app? And the answers are varied. So it's still a topic, but I don't think language learning or having classes is something that we will lose completely. However, things will have to change. Third aspect, agile learning. And this is something I really, really think can help us survive in our business field and can help us to co-learn with the students, especially at a B2, C1 level. And this is something I would like to talk about a little later. And the fourth aspect, digitization, of course. Something that we are all aware of, not only because of the corona pandemic that's hitting us right now, but also because AI and apps and agile learning and, digital learning environments are out there everywhere. Portals that offer all sorts of variety of courses that are purely online, also portals that offer teachers to co-learn with students in kind of video-based training sessions, which is what we do a lot. So all of these things, I'm sure, have an immense influence on our business field, but also on the way we teach and we co-learn with our students. So how can all this be turned into a benefit instead of a kind of scary environment where lots of things are changing, students changing, business field changing, digitization is hitting all of us? How can we make the best out of this scenario, and how can we actively take part in this change? I think, I'm absolutely convinced agile learning can be part of this. Maybe we'll have some agile learning coaches already among us. I don't know, maybe I'm teaching to the converted. What comes to mind when you hear agile learning? Could you quickly type into the box again? Is it something that you're already familiar with? Do we have a few coaches maybe here that could help us with this? Move this a little bit further into there. What comes to your mind when you hear agile learning? Flexible, adopted. Responding to the learner's needs rather than having a fixed plan for the class. Learning slimmed down to the essentials. Wow. You guys say not familiar with the term? That's cool. So we can see whether we can convince you or what you think about that at the end of the workshop. Multi-channel learning, definitely, yes. Something that we all need to do when we teach online, I think. Somebody said in the chat, digital communication has dragged language down into more informal register. It's quite interesting that you chose the word dragged the language down into informal register. It's a very interesting comment. Okay, so it seems that all of us have or many of us have a kind of idea what Agile could be. We all seem to agree it is something flexible. It is something that definitely forces us to very much focus on learners' needs, to take into consideration multi-channel learning, to respond actively or maybe even proactively to learners' needs before we even start teaching. And all of this is part of it. I tend to agree with almost all of your comments. So if it's okay, I'm going to move the survey out of our main screen to the side again. Agile learning, actually, or the idea of agile learning actually comes from project management. So it is something that has been taken over from the manufacturing industry into a learning environment. And by definition, agile learning, the way I understand it in a corporate or university environment, by definition, agile learning divides extensive or lifelong, basically, learning process into individual, manageable learning phases. Okay, now you might say, well, that is not, a big thing. I've done that before. I divided learning into chapters, into classes, into semesters, maybe. Agile learning does a bit more than that. Second point is it is based on 3 pillars: transparency, verification, and adaptation. And this very much speaks for what you typed into the survey box before, flexibility in addressing students' needs. The idea of dividing things into individual and manageable learning phases is called sprints in Agile learning. You invite students to define sprints for themselves to see what they can achieve in a given time frame. And the time frame is set by the students and not necessarily by the university or the teacher or the VHS or the language institute or whoever else we might be working for. The 3 pillars, transparency, verification, and adaptation, refer to transparency needs analysis. So decide together with the students what they want to learn, what you want to co-learn, and make it transparent before you start the teaching process. Verification refers to checking during the learning process. Is what we are doing still what we agreed on before we got started? The sprints. Oh, somebody just wrote that. I didn't quite catch that. Sprints or sprints? Sprints with the T. Sprints. You divide the learning process into sprints. Sorry if my pronunciation wasn't clear enough. And verification means you decide during the teaching phase, is what we're doing still what we plan to do at the beginning of the sprint? And if not, you adapt. You decide to change the plan, to change the contents, to change the way you learn, when you learn, how you learn. Anything is open to discussion. So what does that mean? Sprints, verification, and adaptation. What does that mean for us as teachers? Can I just quickly ask, can you see the main screen in the middle? It's just my audio that is unclear, so everybody can see the screen in the middle. Okay, so I try to speak maybe a little bit more slowly and clearer. But do let me know if anything still remains unclear. Sorry about that. So what does that mean for the class and for us as teachers? If we say, okay, in Agile learning, we want to organize our training transparently, we want to verify what we are doing, and we want to adapt if need arises. What does that mean for the students? It can mean that they bring their personal learning goals in sprints to the table. It definitely means collaborating with others, especially in case you teach in corporate training. It means a regular joint reflection on the whole learning process. This reflection could be peer-to-peer, teacher-to-class, class, teacher, and HR department or talent manager. Any person that the class or the student or you yourself might consider worth taking on board. And it definitely means personal, social, and professional development. What I find very interesting, especially about the fourth point, is that personal, social, and professional development are no longer separated. I remember starting to teach maybe, I don't know, let's say 20 years ago. There was basically no talk about personal or social development when learning a language. What you were thinking, what I personally was thinking about was teaching grammar, looking at lexis, taking students through a book and the given steps there, whether that enhanced their personal or professional development was not, to be honest, necessarily something that came to my mind. Not in the corporate environment and also not in the VHS or the Language Institute environment. And that changed dramatically. These few areas, at least in my experience, are no longer separated but become a joint effort. Okay, so if we want students to do all that, we want them to set their own personal goals. We want them to collaborate with each other. We want them to reflect about their own learning process, and we want them to ideally develop themselves personally and socially. My goodness, how is all this going to work in a 90-minute class and in corporate training? What I think the role of the teachers in all this could be, we can become co-learners. I know, or I've realized the word teachers seems to become more and more, let's say, I wouldn't say outdated, but it tends to be substituted by words like learning facilitator, co-learner, learning enabler. In the end, what we still do in our field to earn money is we teach 90-minute classes, don't we? At least that's what I do, online or offline. So no matter what I call myself, what is my role as a teacher or co-learner? I prefer the word co-learner, to be honest, in this scenario where students have such a big influence on their learning process. What I can do is I can give technical, didactic, and methodical support. I can moderate the process and guide the reflection of the students about their own learning process. And of course, I can give support in processing their learning objectives. I can help them think about the cognitive process that they go through during learning a language. I might say, ooh, this is a lot to ask. You know, I was actually trained as a language teacher, and so was I. And suddenly I find myself in an area where I'm asked to support students in an agile learning environment. How is this supposed to work? How can I do that? This is where the co-learning aspect comes in. In agile learning, the theory behind agile learning is that the student knows best what to learn and how to learn from a certain level onwards. A1 or A2 students still need our guidance on grammar and lexis, and they need the basis to be taught. However, at a B2, C1 level, I think we can probably agree that we can rely on the students to know what exactly they need to learn and what exactly they need to be able to do in an corporate or university environment in a foreign language. And this is where we become co-learners rather than traditional teachers. Okay, are you with me so far? Is that something that makes sense to you? Can you just quickly let me know in the chat whether you're okay with that? Very much. Oh, thank you. Yes, keep going. Thank you very much. Okay, super. Very good. So I'm convinced you so far. I'm happy. So what or how can we turn this, all of this into a beneficial learning experience to co-learners and students? My personal experience is we need to start with a good needs analysis. I don't know whether you carry out your needs analysis yourselves or whether the institutes you work for, universities, companies, language schools, communication institutes, do they do that for you before you start teaching? Do they send out placement tests, and how do you do that? Could you quickly advise me in the chat? I'd be interested in learning how you do that. Some people say they do the test themselves. Okay. Yeah, you can ask before you choose a book, for example. Needs analysis is quite a standard. Okay. Varies from place to place. Yeah, the university people have, of course, they have their own testing system. You tailor, most people tailor the needs analysis to general versus business English. That's a very interesting thing to say. Some do it in paper form, you're writing, some do it orally. Yeah, that's all super. That's all very useful and good to know. So yeah, some students get a diagnostic test. Yeah, there are various words. Yeah, some people say assessment test, others call it placement test, needs analysis, diagnostic test, placement test. Is some of you writing. Interesting. Right. That's I agree with most of what you're saying. Actually, with all what you're saying, we follow the same system. We do a placement test to make sure the students that do join our classes start, at least with regard to their language level, from the same. They have the more or less same language level. So let's say B2, C1 level has been checked. Most people either follow the Cornelius placement test or have other placement tests online that they do. Some universities have their own one. Some have an official. I've done an official test like the TOEIC or TOEFL. So that's what we definitely also do. But I feel that this is not enough because let me share with you what happened just let's say about three or four months ago, I think. I had one of these I can handle it all groups, students that are at a B2 C1 level. And we got a call from a talent manager of a company we've been cooperating with for a couple of years. And she gave me a ring and said, we'll need a class because I've got 2 people who have to work or will be working in international sales. Okay, no problem. They would like to improve their negotiation skills, so they need English for negotiations. That's super. Okay, no problem. So I gave them a ring and I did a kick-off meeting. So we call it kick-off meetings. I usually meet people via telephone or nowadays video conferencing to talk about what they need. So I carried out a needs analysis. Okay, so what did I do? I asked them a few questions. Said, okay, what do you need to learn? They said, why is it you want to do English or you want to have English classes? And one guy said, well, I want to become more fluent. And the other said, yeah, I want to negotiate better. I want to be better at negotiating. And oh yeah, we have problems with accents. We sometimes don't understand what our negotiation partners are saying. So in my inner eye, I went through my shelf, had a look at all the books I have, said, okay, what kind of language do I have for negotiation skills? I have a short course. I've got some stuff in the Business English series. So I felt I do have the language ready, to provide them with useful phrases, with negotiation related vocabulary to help them along. So we agreed on the first 2 appointments and started the first meeting. And what shall I say? The first 2 meetings didn't go too well, to be honest. So following the agile learning concept, I felt that this first sprint, the first 2 meetings, I felt I needed to do some verification and adapt. Why did it not go well? Everything that I brought on board, they already knew. So I had a list of useful phrases. I did some game sort of stuff on negotiation language. And they actually had absolutely no issues with the language. So I thought, oh my goodness, okay, what to do? Of course, I didn't want to lose the contract. Well, that's obvious, isn't it? So that there must be something I can do to help them because they asked for language training. So what is it? So what I did is, somebody's already giving me some help, saying simulation, simulation, simulation. Yes, I partly went into that direction, also role plays, but still, also in the role play scenario, they had no problems negotiating with each other or negotiating with me, for example. Absolutely no problem language-wise. So I turned back to the European Framework of Reference, the new edition 2018, and had a look again at what exactly is it that students need to be able to do when they use a second or third language. And I suppose most of us know there are the 4 areas: reception, mediation, production, and interaction. And that made me think. I personally think was very heavily on the side of production. What I was thinking about was what kind of language do they need to be able to produce sentences and meaningful phrases in the English language in a negotiation context. But that was not what they had in mind. What they had in mind was they needed help in mediation situations and in interactive situations. The language itself, the technical terms and phrases useful in their specific particular field of business were absolutely not the issue at all. But the interaction with people from other countries, with suppliers, for example, from India, from Sweden, mediation situations, mediation in a plurilingual and pluricultural environment, that was the issue. So what it boiled down to was not the language as I had thought at the beginning from a language teacher's perspective. The issue was or were the skills, the communication skills. Somebody already says there in the chat, students often don't know what they need. Yeah, that's a good point. I think you're absolutely right there. At least they didn't exactly know how to phrase it, or maybe I asked the wrong questions. Maybe there's something wrong at both ends. We were definitely thinking about different points in the needs analysis that I thought we were carrying out together. So what I needed to do was to adapt the sessions that we did together towards the area mediation and interaction. And those of you who've already maybe done a workshop on the new European Framework of Reference, not so new anymore, 2018, already know mediation is a really, really big topic. It does not only refer to mediating difficult situations, it also refers to transferring meaning from one language field to another language field in a third language. So speaking in English, for example, as a native speaker of German to a Swedish supplier whose first language is Swedish, who maybe also speaks English and French, but has to make meaning out of a situation in English. So mediation does not only refer to solving problems or issues. So this is actually, I found out in my second needs analysis, this is actually what they needed to do. And the result was that we basically dumped the first 2 sessions, to be honest, and started anew. So what did I do then? I decided, okay, if this needs analysis didn't go that well, then I probably made the same mistake in some other needs analysis. So how can I improve on that? And I think following one of your comments there in the chat that students often don't know how to phrase exactly what they need, thought maybe my questions need to be more specific. Maybe I need to specifically ask them, also thinking about what needs to be done in writing and what needs to be done orally, ask them specifically about their needs. For example, looking at reception, instead of saying what kind of text is it you deal with, I ask questions like what text do you deal with? What kind of text do you need to read? What do you need to be able? Who do you need to be able to listen to? For example, during telephone conferences. Whereas my previous question had been, do you ever take part in teleconferences? Answer of the students, yes. Do you speak English there with lots of non-native speakers? Yeah, it's a mixed bunch. Okay, tick the box. And that obviously was not enough for the needs analysis in this case. In production, what kind of tasks text do you need to write? In which situations do you need to be able to use negotiation language? What kind of setting is it? Is it international? Is it 2 nationalities? What cultural background? What genders do you need to negotiate with? Do you negotiate with women in the Arabic world, for example? That sort of thing came to mind. Interaction. Who do you communicate with in writing? Who do you need to be able to speak with? What nationality, cultural background does your negotiation partner in this case have? And mediation, what kind of specific information do you need to relay? What kind of collaboration do you need to be able to facilitate? By asking these questions, I got more specific answers, and I felt I was getting closer to what the students really wanted to do. And the answer was not learning more language. The answer was doing something with the language that they already had. So I'm with you there with some of you who said in the survey boxes and the chat box, they don't want more business jargon. I think what they want is to be able to do something, to perform skills with the language that they already have. And what we need to do is to polish the language that we have at a B2, C1 level. Make sense so far? Are you with me? Okay. So if anything says this, no, this is not the way I'm going, please do put it in the chat. The more we benefit from each other and share experience, the better. Okay. So far, you're with me. Super. So where did this take me from there? Said, okay, now I know what to do. I knew how to tweak my needs analysis. I came together with my two negotiation guys, and we took it from there. Bearing in mind, I wanted to keep it agile. I wanted my students to tell me what they wanted to learn, what their needs were, and I was willing to always make it transparent, to verify and to adapt all the time during the various sprints that we had set. Our sprints were usually 4 meetings, but that's up to you. You know, we had a half a year contract, so having 4-week sprints seemed to make sense to them to check at the end of each month, are we still on track? Is this still what we need to do? So teaching solutions. What can we offer our students, bearing in mind that that we now slowly turn from teachers to co-learners, moving towards a skills area, away from just or sheer language teaching? What kind of material, what kind of tasks, exercises, design, instruction design do we need? What I've tried so far is the following, and I'd like to share with you. So please feel free to comment, to put things into the chat if there is anything you think I should change or that you'd like to add. I'm happy to listen to your advice. I think for me and for my students, the classroom culture's changed. I now try to create a classroom culture at a B2, C1 level that focuses on precision and complexity. Why precision and complexity? My experience up to B1 level is that all of my students say, what I want to learn is communicate, speak, speak, speak. So everybody says, I want to use the sessions to speak, to say what I need to say in a more or less appropriate way. And the focus is always on speaking, on communicating meaning, not necessarily on accurateness, on precision, or on correctness. I often don't interrupt my students to correct at a B1 or A2 level. I'd rather have them speak and get used to the language, and I only interrupt or correct them in case I feel, oh, this will probably not be understood by a native speaker. Now, at a B2, C1 level, I think we're looking at a different bunch of people. This is where precision and complexity become a useful tool in their professional life. Now, what do I mean by precision and complexity? I think we now go beyond what is said and focus on how we're saying what we're saying. Because at a B2, C1 level, most students, I think, are already able to handle their everyday business life. They may even have in the lexical area and a range of vocabulary that enables them to say what they want to say, maybe not only in one way, but in 2 or 3 or 4 different ways. So teaching them more vocabulary might not necessarily do the trick, but teaching them to be precise and to deal with complex language matter, that is, I think, what adds benefit to their professional life, and that is skills training. And this is something that we can add to our business portfolio as well. So going beyond what is said to how we are saying it. How can this complexity be turned into practical exercises? First of all, I started to change my instruction design. I think complexity requires what some people far cleverer than myself call multifaceted instruction design. What does that mean? At an A2 level, an instruction could, for example, be read the text and underline all verbs in the past, or something like this, or underline all words that have to do with camping, or something like this. Multifaceted design asks students to go through texts, through audios, through videos, and do various things in multiple levels simultaneously. I'm going to show you a few examples in Anne's C1 book to get a feel for what kind of instruction design that is. So multifaceted instruction design. For example, agile management, and this is an example by Anne in her C1 book. She actually has a whole chapter on agile learning and agile management. So if you want to have a look, just have a look at this chapter, and this already gives you a fabulous idea of how an agile session could be set up. So in this task, just give you a second to read it through. In this task, you can see that people are asked to do not only one thing, but to reflect about learning and then carry it into their working world. This interconnection of a personal learning experience and a professional learning experience is exactly what agile learning asks us to do. Connect social, professional, and personal learning experience and change your thinking, change the way you're dealing with professional challenges and personal challenges. Don't separate the two or the three anymore. And this is exactly what multifaceted design does. It asks students to handle various tasks simultaneously, always taking on board reflection about what this means for their professional or personal development. Another example is, for example, your world example. So this is about gender stereotypes. So an issue that one might need mediation skills to talk about. So careful language, trying to move around here. The students are asked to think about whether gender stereotypes still exist in their generation, and then how this might have an impact on their career or their career advancement in the field they're working in. This box alone once took me 45 minutes. I used this box, the gender stereotype box, for 2 breakout rooms. So I did this in online teaching and had students discuss this in their breakout rooms and then come back with a sort of mini presentation of their findings. So set here thesis, a pro and con arguments, and then a summary, which worked fabulously. It was really, really well. And plus, they also brought on board the ethical code of their own company that we then discussed. So it was a really super session. Somebody just said, wouldn't be able to do that with every group. Oh, yes, I agree. I agree. I'm not sure whether I would start that kind of discussion with a group of engineers, for example. Although, well, it depends on whether they think that's useful to handle. If they think such a discussion doesn't advance them in any way, then well, it's their right to say, please leave that out of the session. But as I said, I had a mixed group and it worked very well in my group. Or a third example would be in the area of HR, this radar chart, which I did with a group of people. And I'll leave you a minute to read through the multifaceted instruction. So what Anne's done here, somebody just wrote in the chat, sex, politics, and religion, danger, danger, danger. Yes, you're right there, but no risk, no fun. It's worth a try. I mean, so you can always skip that if you feel that's something that that doesn't go well with your group. So this example of the radar chart has a very nice and beautiful multifaceted instruction design. It asks you, first of all, to analyze the radar chart itself. How do the two personalities compare? Then it asks you, would you prefer person A or B to be your team leader? So you're asked to take this or to involve this or to involve this in your personal development, your personal professional development. And what other positions do you think this kind of person might be suitable for? Plus, there is this person, Christina, which is a persona we're using in the unit, that also comes on board. So we're asking students to do 3 things in one instruction. The experience that most students make with these kind of instructions is it broadens their horizon, and they usually perceive this as challenging. And challenges is something that almost all of my students say they want. When I ask them in the needs analysis, what is the kind or what kind of training do you envisage when you're thinking about English language training? And the standard answer is, get me out of my comfort zone. I want a challenge. I know my English is good enough to handle whatever I need to handle in everyday life. I want a challenge. I want to discuss actively. I want to discuss things that I'm unfamiliar with, to broaden my vocabulary, to be able to read between the lines, to convey emotions in my language. So multifaceted design does exactly that. And Anne did it beautifully throughout the book. So as you can see, I'm a real aficionado of this book. I really, really think it's fantastic. She did a fantastic job together with Carol Eilertson. So here's the complexity thing. Now, what about precision? Where does precision come on board? As I said before, up to B1 level, my idea was usually keep students talking. As long as they talk, they're happy. They're using the language actively, and I correct them whenever I feel a native speaker would not understand. At a B2 C1 level, there is not so much to correct anymore. This is why precision, I think, needs to be defined on a different level. Precision here, I think, requires a broader range of vocabulary and an in-depth analysis of the language structure beyond right or wrong. Because let's face it, at a C1 level, you might still come across people not using the present perfect correctly or using the wrong preposition. Does that matter in an international context? Or does that matter to people using global English? Do we still need to discuss whether it should be in the weekend, at the weekend, or on the weekend, for example? I don't think so. I think what matters more is that we can together learn language structures that are context-based. To learn knowledge of context-based use of language structures is exactly what students ask for when they say, I want to be more fluent. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. For example, this is a box that Carol wrote into the C1 book. It says always plus ing. Often means we're complaining about something or we're giving negative information. So don't use that when you're speaking to somebody directly. At a B1 level, we probably all taught ing forms can be used to talk about something that is happening right now. It can be used to talk about a fixed future using time, place, and date when something is happening, that sort of thing. Here, we're using language that enables students to read between the lines. It would not be wrong to say, for example, you always forget about this meeting on Monday. That would not be a wrong thing to say. However, a native speaker might say, you're always forgetting about this Monday meeting, if he was allowed to say that to a close colleague, maybe. And at a B2 C1 level, students should be able to read between the lines and to understand what is behind this language structure, if used by a British or American speaker or Australian speaker. So that is what I mean by precision. I do not necessarily mean get all the prepositions right, get all your tenses right, but try to enable students to be precise in the emotional level that they carry with the language that they use. Another example is this one, for example. This is what is called a grammar explanation. And instead of presenting grammar to them, to then ask them to fill in boxes or fill in gaps, which we also do in a practice section. The team decided, let's have students work on the language themselves. Coax them into trying to find out where they've heard these kind of sentences, what context have they heard them in, what is their gut feeling, or do they have a hunch what this might mean? You will find lots of exercises in the book that push the explanation, explanation task into the area of the students, instead of the teacher telling them how it is done and then following by more or less parroting the sentences that they are given. It's a lot of work on language in the book. By precision, I also mean, of course, technical precision. For example, as Anne wrote very nicely in box 3, a responsible person is not necessarily the person responsible. This is too true. So words like these that enable students to come across as professionally well-equipped when it comes to language use. That is, I think, something that gives benefit, that is beneficial to the students and to us as teachers as well, or as co-learners, because it enables us to ask them, what is it exactly that you need? What kind of language do you need to, for example, learn in a negotiation setting? Is it a technical language? What kind of emotional background do you perceive when having to negotiate with your negotiation partner? Is it going to be a very easygoing negotiation, or is it a very formal setting? What culture does that person come from? All of this comes into language structure and precision and complexity of the entire situation. And somebody already said we shouldn't forget about the fact that many of our contacts are non-native speakers. Absolutely, absolutely. And this is where I think complexity and precision becomes even more important, because we're now teaching on a second level. We might be speaking English with somebody who has Swedish as his or her first language, learned his English from an Irish, for example, English teacher in Stockholm. And he undoubtedly will have learned all sorts of useful phrases that that teacher took from his environment into the language learning process. So what we need is more mediating language in case situations do not run so well in a negotiation setting, for example. We need to enable students to mediate, to talk on a meta level about what might have gone wrong and why there might be a misunderstanding. And we have loads of mediating examples also in the C1 book. Let me give you another example of the audio and video comprehension task. So again, we're moving from understanding what was said to how it was said and what the students' thoughts are about the content and the context. So here's another multifaceted instruction related to a video. And you might notice that in contrast to an A2 or B1 level, we're not asking we don't ask students to listen to to watch the audio, or to watch the video or listen to the audio to then tick comprehension boxes. Instead, the team decided to have two instructions before the listening to the voiceover, namely to listen to what the situation is like and what the concept in general is like, and what it is like in terms of circular design. That is the topic of the unit, circular design. And after that discussion, after that thinking about the context and reflection of the context, we get to partner work or group work to discuss questions that relate to the audio to make things more precise and to dig into the complexity of the whole matter. Text reading, last example. What to do with text reading? Do your students still read text, or have you given up on text reading? Can you quickly give me some feedback on whether this is still useful to you, or? Yes. Okay. So still do specific topics. Exactly. Yes. Somebody just said in the chat, very specific topics is what they're interested in. That's my experience too. So they usually don't do just general news, but something that is very either industry or field related or has to do with their profession. So what I usually do is I devise a task that, as a colleague of ours said very nicely, to squeeze the text dry. What I mean by that is reading between the lines, gathering collocations. Somebody said in the chat before, collocations are super important and couldn't agree more. Very useful task to give to the students to gather collocations in the text, and to ask them to watch out for context-based grammar, like the example that Anne gave before with the always and the inform. And ask them to, or invite them to practice setting the tone or getting a feel for the tone of the text. An example in email writing could be this, for example. So here we have two emails, two conflicting emails. And I invited my students to read this. Most of them had, at a B2C1 level, they had no problems with the words as such, so vocabulary was not an issue. However, the first question that came up was, is that impolite? Is the first or is the second email impolite? And my question back was, what do you think? Why do you think it is impolite? Or what makes you think it is impolite? What is impolite? So that, of course, started us on the discussion of how to be polite in English and how to define politeness in English. The instruction design that Anne decided for is exactly that, read between the lines. What is the tone of the emails? And you will notice that there is no absolute right or wrong, no absolute answer to this question. I'm sure if we ask all of us here, we would probably come up with all sorts of different answers that we could type into the chat if we ask ourselves, what is the tone of these emails? Some might say gross, others might say impolite, others might say, well, it's a bit over the top. Depending on where we are from, depending on what kind of corporal culture we are used to when teaching emails. So, and Anne, or the C1 book, ask our students to exactly do that, to reflect about the language that is offered to them and how words and phrases can overcome assumptions that we might have based on the text that we read. So this is meant by squeezing a text dry. Agile learning, I think, changed. I do not only think, I'm convinced it changed a lot of my teaching in the past year, independent of whether I do it online or offline. What I did before was very much focused on the different levels of language learning. And I think the European framework of reference gives us a perfect and a super framework to do that. It helps us to look for descriptors to enable students to see what kind of language skills they need to learn to be able to have a job in the future world. However, it is still level related. I took my students sometimes from A1, A2 to B1, B2, and sometimes with the help of native speaker colleagues to the level C1, usually not C2, but at C1 level. That did not necessarily lead to students saying, I'm now able to do everything I need to do in my business environment. This is exactly the situation that I encountered when I have this needs analysis discussion with my negotiation students who both spoke really, really good English as a second or even third language, and still they felt they were not really able to handle the negotiation situations that they had to face in their business life. So how agile learning, the idea of having small sprints that you adapt, that you verify, that you transparently check together, how this can make us co-learners and how our students can benefit from this for their future working life, is by looking at the learning experience as something like this. Language skills that they want to acquire are usually, I feel, communication skills. Communication skills are very closely related to social skills. all of us have probably once in our lifetimes taught socializing skills, starting a conversation, keeping the ball rolling, that sort of thing, networking, socializing skills. Socializing skills demand language skills. Language skills very often demand mediation skills, overcoming cultural bridges, communication issues and situations, which again needs raises the needs for further language skills. So this agile learning concept turned what used to be a kind of one-way road, actually, from A1 to C1 into a business field that now enables me to offer also my clients something more than just in big air quotes. Don't get me wrong, big air quotes, just language training. It enables me to offer them skills training that develops their personal and their professional development at the same time. And this is what I'm trying to do now. Well, this is now 12:59. Very good. 1 minute more for questions from your end. Is this something you could see yourself doing in the future, or is this something you maybe already do? Maybe I should learn from you, from your experience. Is this something you already do? Are you working in this circle? I can see lots of people typing. Excellent. So some of you seem to be far more advanced than I am. took me a while to get there. Very good. I'm glad to hear you see it the same way. So it seems that most of us agree that this is at least a way that that we should be going. And those of you who've already done it for years, kudos to you. I'm sure we can all benefit from your advice and see how you're already doing it. Excellent. Super. So thank you very much for sharing all this. This is really super helpful. And I think I'll hand over to Aslam again.